Happy Friday! We are on chapter 14 today, and it's kind of short, so we'll see. I might do 14 and 15 today. We'll just have to see. Chapter 14, the search begins, and we know that they were not successful in getting Lincoln's body, and they were also not successful in catching the grave robbers. So now they're searching for the criminals. As the overnight train rolled out of Springfield, Tyrell walked through every car, inspecting faces. Hughes and Mullen were not aboard. Swaggles was, but he was careful to avoid eye contact with the operative. It was important the two not be seen together, just in case any of the Cody men's friends happened to be aboard. But at some point in the middle of the night, Tyrell risked a quick consultation with the roper. He slipped Swaggles $10 and asked if he'd be willing to help hunt Hughes and Mullen. Swaggles agreed. When the train pulled into Chicago early that morning, Swaggles headed home, and Tyrell went to his office to write up his report to Chief Brooks. I have now, sir, given you the details of one of the most unfortunate nights I ever have experienced, he concluded. The encounter on President Lincoln's monument shall ever be remembered by me. Tyrell confessed he had no idea where the suspects were, adding, but Chief, their capture is only a question of time. So I love how he's telling him, I failed, but it's okay. We're going to catch him eventually. As an exhausted Tyrell hunched over his office desk in Chicago, Hughes and Mullen trudged on through the chilly morning somewhere near the town of Sherman, Illinois. By 8 a.m., they were drained, filthy, starving, and hopelessly lost. When they saw two farmers loading sacks of potatoes into a wagon, they took a chance. Seen any strangers around here? Hughes called out. The farmers, John Dixon and Thomas Kegel, looked up from their work. As they later told newspapers, they were instantly wary of these dusty travelers. Why? Asked Kegel. There was a row in Springfield last night, Hughes said, pitching the story he and Mullen had concocted to explain their tired eyes and dirty clothes. A man had been stabbed, Hughes explained, and he and Mullen were out looking for the killers. The farmers were unconvinced. Why, they asked Hughes, had he and his friend chosen to chase a bunch of murderers on foot? Hughes mumbled something about having left his wagon back by the river. Mullen jumped in with the real reason they'd stopped, asking if the men might spare some milk, maybe a bite of bread. No, the farmers said. Well, Mullen asked, could they at least point out the direction to the nearest train station? The farmers did this, and Hughes and Mullen headed east. Turning back to their potatoes, the farmers discussed the strange encounter. The hungry strangers appeared to be on the run, they agreed, and were probably criminals of some kind. Kegel wanted to go grab them, or at least tell someone in town. Dixon just wanted to get back to work. They decided to go back to work. The two farmers would have been even more suspicious if they had read that morning's Chicago Tribune, which was the newspaper. Election news dominated the first few pages. Results in a few states were still unclear, but the Tribune was ready to make its call. When we write these lines, all the indications are that Samuel J. Tilden has been elected President of the United States. Not until readers reached page 5 did they see a story from Springfield with this headline: Dastardly attempt to despoil the Lincoln Monument. Thieves trying to steal the bones of the martyr president. This was the short article John English had telegraphed to Chicago the night before. He briefly described the tomb break-in and the narrow escape of the body snatchers. If human ingenuity can track them, it will be done, he stated. It is earnestly hoped that the double-distilled predators of this attempted robbery of the remains of America's most loved president will soon be brought to justice. Later that morning, English watched Washburn and McGinn searched the Lincoln Monument grounds for clues. Beneath a tree, they found the bullseye lantern, its glass lens cracked. Nearby, they found a patch of grass with its green blades pressed flat against the dirt. Two men had been lying there very recently. From this spot, two sets of footprints led to the fence and out to the street. While the detectives gathered evidence and a steady stream of visitors walked up to the monument to see the crime scene for themselves, John Carroll Power patiently answered questions, as always. Yes, there had been a break-in. No, the thieves had not taken Lincoln's body. And no, visitors could not see the catacomb. Both doors to the tomb chamber remained closed and locked. Inside, sticking more than a foot out of its broken marble box, Lincoln's coffin rested on the tile floor. At 10:30 that morning, a still sleepless Tyrrell checked in with Robert Lincoln. Mr. Lincoln expressed his satisfaction and asked if I could arrest the parties Mullen and Hughes. Tyrrell recalled, I told him that it was only a question of time, that in a few days they would both show up. Tyrrell didn't know that for sure, of course, but his long experience as a cop told him that crooks almost always drift back to their friends, their home base, and the place they feel safe. It's one of the main reasons criminals get caught. With this in mind, he met Sveggles and asked his roper to return to the hub. But act very cautious, he added. This was a dicey assignment for Sveggles. It was a safe bet Big Jim had read that morning's Tribune. He'd surely be fuming about the fiasco in Springfield and very eager to know how the police had just happened to be there. Still, it would be even more dangerous for Sveggles to stay away from the hub. Avoiding it would make him look like he had something to hide. Early the next morning, November 9th, Hughes and Mullen reached the railroad station at Chestnut, about 40 miles northeast of Springfield. They had no money for tickets, but when a train pulled in, they jumped on. When the conductor came around to collect tickets, Hughes was ready with another half-baked story. He and his friend had just bought a bunch of cattle and blown all their cash. Hughes did not attempt to explain where the cows were at the moment or why buying livestock should get him out of paying for his train ticket. Instead, he pulled out his revolver and offered to let the conductor hold on to it until they got to the town of Melvin. There, he'd get cash from his family, pay for the tickets, and take back his gun. The conductor stuck the pistol in his pocket. It was worth a lot more than 2 train tickets. Hughes and Mullen hopped off in Melvin and walked to Hughes's father's nearby farm. He told his dad he and Mullen had been in Texas, borrowed a few dollars, went back to the station, paid for the tickets, and picked up his gun. Then Hughes returned to his father's place to lie low, rest, and eat. Mullen was worried about his saloon and eager to talk to Sveggles. He got on the next train and headed to Chicago. Back in Springfield, Lincoln still lay on the floor. Power begged for help from John Stewart of the Monument Association, and Stewart agreed to send out Adam Johnston, a Springfield marble dealer. As Power looked on, Johnson and 2 of his employees shoved the coffin back into the sarcophagus. They cemented the top and front pieces back on. A few days later, Stewart rode out to the monument himself. He was too worried to sleep at night, he told Power. They'd fixed the marble box, but so what? Lincoln's body was right back where it had been when the thieves almost made off with it. Something more had to be done. Johnson and his workmen returned. Power let them into the catacomb, and the marble workers cracked open the sarcophagus. They pulled out Lincoln's coffin and dragged it to a dark corner where it could not be seen from outside. Then they carefully sealed up the sarcophagus and left it in its usual spot in the middle of the room. Johnson came back after dark, this time without his workers. Power was there as arranged. So were John Stewart and 2 other members of the association. We 5 then carried the coffin from the catacomb around the east side of the monument to Memorial Hall, Power recalled. Their arms and shoulders burning with pain, the men hurried through the hall, into the dark labyrinth, twisted around a few turns, and set the 500-pound box down by the base of the obelisk. Worn out and aching, Stewart and his friends headed home. Johnson and Power carried wooden planks through the labyrinth and started hammering together a huge box, building it right around Lincoln's cedar coffin. It was exceedingly hard work for 2 men, Power said, and the atmosphere we had to breathe was almost stifling for want of ventilation. The job finally done, Power thanked Johnson and sent him home. He did not want anyone to see what he was going to do next. So without permission, they moved the coffin and they are boxing it in somewhere else in Memorial Hall, not in the monument area. So here is a picture of Lincoln's coffin hidden inside the foundations of the monument. So I wonder what Power and Johnson are going to, what Power's going to do next, because it said he didn't want anyone to see what he was going to do. And chapter 15 will be called Back to the Hub. Bye guys. See you Monday.